The rain came slow at first, like whispers over the prairie grass, gentle and uncertain, as if the heavens themselves were deciding whether to cry. The clouds rolled over the horizon like smoke from a dying fire, their bellies heavy with thunder. Beneath that gray sky, a lone rider pushed his horse through the mud-slick trail. His hat pulled low, his coat darkened with rain. His name was Eli Carter, a man shaped by the silence of the plains and the weight of promises left behind. Each hoofbeat sounded like a heartbeat against the storm, steady, relentless, and driven by something deeper than duty. Eli had been on the trail since dawn. The letter still burned in his coat pocket, ink smudged from his fingers, the words written by trembling hands that had once steadied his soul. "Meet me by the churchyard before sundown," it said. "If the rain comes, I'll still be waiting." That was all. No name signed, but he didn't need one. He knew her writing like he knew the sound of her laughter, or the way she said his name when the world was quiet. Clara, the only person who had ever made him believe that even a man like him could be saved. The small white steeple of St. Mary's Church rose out of the fog, like a ghost on the horizon. It was the last place he'd seen her before the war took him away. He'd left her with a promise, one he had broken by surviving when others hadn't, by wandering when he should have returned. Now he was coming back, not as the man she remembered, but as the man he had become, weathered, scarred, and hunted by his own regrets. The rain thickened, slanting in sheets that blurred the world to gray. The church bell was silent, but its shadow stood tall against the storm. Eli slowed his horse near the gates of the churchyard. The wooden cross at the top gleamed faintly beneath the lightning. Rows of forgotten graves lined the field beyond, the earth dark and wet, the names worn away by years of wind and sorrow. For a moment he thought she wouldn't come. Maybe she'd given up waiting. Maybe the letter had been a ghost's whisper sent to test his faith. But then, through the mist and rain, he saw her. Clara stood beneath the church's porch, her crimson dress soaked and clinging to her like a second skin. Her hair was dark and wet, strands plastered against her face. She looked fragile against the storm, yet unyielding, as though she had been standing there not for hours, but for years, holding fast to hope in defiance of everything that had tried to take it from her. When she saw him, her breath caught and a faint, trembling smile touched her lips. "Eli," she whispered as he dismounted. Her voice carried through the rain like a prayer. "Clara," he replied, removing his hat. His voice was rough, tired, a little broken. He took a few steps forward, boots sinking into the mud, eyes locked on hers. "You shouldn't be out here." "I told you I'd wait," she said softly. "And I did." He swallowed hard, words tangled in the knot that had formed in his chest. The sound of rain filled the silence between them, steady and cold. "You got my letter?" he asked. She nodded, and every word felt like a wound. "I didn't think you'd come back." "I almost didn't," he admitted, glancing down at the ground. "But I couldn't stay gone. Not anymore." She took a slow step forward, the boards of the porch creaking under her feet. "You left me with nothing but a promise. Eli, you said you'd come back for me when the war ended." "I know," his voice cracked. "And I failed you." The thunder rolled low and heavy, echoing across the fields. The rain came harder, blurring the lines of the world until all that remained was them, two souls standing between the storm and the sanctuary. Eli took a deep breath and met her gaze again. "I've seen things out there, Clara, things that change a man. But every time I thought I'd lost myself, I remembered your face. You kept me alive." Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. "Then why did it take you so long to come home?" "Because I wasn't sure I deserved to." That answer hung in the air like the toll of a bell. The distance between them felt endless, filled with years of silence and regret. Yet when she stepped off the porch and crossed the mud toward him, Eli didn't move. He stood rooted as she stopped in front of him, close enough for him to see the reflection of his own pain in her eyes. "You don't get to decide what you deserve," she said softly. "You get to decide what you fight for." Eli felt something inside him break open, a flood of emotion he had buried beneath gunpowder and grief. His hand trembled as he reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Then I'll fight for you," he said, "from now until my last breath." For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the rain, the wind, even the thunder fading into silence. Then she smiled through her tears and leaned her forehead against his chest. "You always did talk like a poet," she murmured. "And you always made me believe it," he whispered back. The church bell finally tolled, One long, mournful note that rolled across the fields. It sounded like the beginning of something and the ending of something else. Eli looked toward the church door, slightly ajar, candlelight flickering within. "You said you'd wait by the church," he said. "But I never asked why." Clara stepped back, her eyes steady. "Because I wanted you to remember what promises mean. That they're not words, Eli. They're vows. You can't take them back once you've spoken them." He nodded slowly, understanding now. "Then I'll make one more," he said, voice low, carried by the rhythm of the rain. "Here now." He took her hand, rough against his. "I promise you my life, Clara, whatever's left of it. I'll stand with you, I'll fight for you, and I'll die before I break this one." Lightning flashed across the sky, white and blinding. The rain came down harder, baptizing them both beneath its weight. Clara looked at him, her eyes bright with something fierce and unspoken. "Then I'll hold you to it," she said. In that moment, under the weeping sky and the shadow of the church, two souls found each other again, not as they were, but as they had become, wounded, changed, yet bound by something unbreakable. The storm raged, but it could not drown the fire between them. As they stood there, the wind carrying the scent of rain and earth, Eli realized that sometimes redemption didn't come with forgiveness. It came with choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave. It came with love that endured the storm instead of waiting for it to pass. When they finally walked into the church together, hand in hand, the candles flickered as if welcoming them home. The sound of the rain softened against the roof like applause from heaven itself. And though neither spoke another word, both knew the truth. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of everything they had fought to reach. The door to St. Mary's creaked open with a long, weary sigh, as though the old church itself had been waiting for this moment. The flicker of candlelight spilled across the wooden floor, catching the rainwater that dripped from their coats and boots. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, wax, and time, the kind of air that carries memory in every breath. Eli paused at the threshold, his hand still holding Clara's. For years, this place had been nothing but a ghost in his mind, a symbol of what he'd lost. Now, as he stepped inside, he felt the weight of every promise he had ever made pressing down on him. The wooden pews were empty, the altar dressed in white linen, the cross above it gleaming faintly in the candlelight. Clara's footsteps echoed softly beside him as she walked down the aisle. "It's just like I remembered," she said quietly. "Only quieter." Eli glanced at her. "Everything gets quieter after the war." She looked back at him, her eyes tracing the lines of his face, the scars, the stubble, the years carved into his skin. "You don't talk about it," she said. He shook his head. "Some things ain't meant to be spoken. They just sit inside you, waiting for the right reason to be forgiven." Clara stopped before the altar and turned toward him. "Then maybe that's why you came back, to find that reason." Eli took a deep breath. "Or maybe I came back because I got tired of running from ghosts." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, making the candles flicker. The storm hadn't eased, if anything. It seemed to have grown darker, like the world outside was reflecting the turmoil inside him. He walked closer, standing beside her. For a moment there was peace in the sound of the rain against the roof, the gentle rhythm of two hearts learning to beat together again. But peace, Eli knew, never lasted long for men like him. The creak of wood behind them was sharp, deliberate. His instincts kicked in before his mind caught up. He turned, his hand already at the grip of his revolver. The church door stood open again, swaying in the wind. 3 figures stepped in from the storm, silhouettes cut against the lightning, guns in their hands, hat brims dripping with rain. Eli's heart hardened. He knew those shapes. He'd ridden with men like them once, before the war, before Clara, before he'd tried to be something better. "Evening, Carter," came a voice he hadn't heard in years. Smooth, cold, and cruel. "Didn't think we'd find you playing preacher in the rain." Eli's blood turned to ice. "Mason," he said quietly, "you're a long way from Texas." The man stepped forward, his slick black coat gleaming under the candlelight. "Long way, sure, but Det's got long legs, too." Clara moved slightly behind Eli, her breath quickening. "Who are they?" she whispered. Eli didn't look back. "Old friends. Worse memories." Mason smirked. "You left us high and dry, partner. Took the gold, rode off to be a soldier, and left us to rot. You think we'd forget that?" Eli's jaw clenched. "I didn't take the gold." "You know that." "Maybe, maybe not." Mason raised his gun, eyes glinting. "But it don't matter now. What matters is the past finally caught up. The rain outside beat harder, thunder rumbling like the voice of God. Eli stepped in front of Clara. You don't need to do this, he said evenly. There's nothing here but a woman and a man who's tired of fighting. That's the thing, Eli, Mason said, cocking his gun. The fight don't care if you're tired. The crack of the first gunshot shattered the air. Eli dove to the side, grabbing Clara and pulling her down behind a pew. The bullet tore through the back wall, splinters raining down. Candlelight trembled wildly, casting the shadows of the gunmen across the walls like demons dancing. Eli pulled his revolver free. The steel felt heavy and familiar, like shaking hands with an old sin. Stay down, he whispered. I'm not leaving you. Clara hissed back, gripping his arm. You promised you'd wait, he said sharply. Now keep that promise. He peeked around the pew. One of Mason's men had moved toward the front. Reloading. Eli took a breath, exhaled slow, and fired. The shot hit true. The man dropped, his gun clattering across the floor. The other outlaw cursed and fired back. Bullets tore through the pew, wood splintering inches from Eli's head. Clara covered her ears, her eyes wide with terror. Eli turned to her. When I tell you to run, you run for the door. Don't look back. No, she cried. You promised me your life. He stared at her. Rain, fear, love all burning in her eyes. And I meant it, he said. That's why I'm doing this. Mason's voice echoed through the church. You can't hide forever, Eli. We'll drag your bones out of here if we have to. Eli stood, heart hammering. He remembered every sin that had led him to this point. Every choice that carved the man he had become. And now, standing in a house of God, he finally understood what redemption looked like. It wasn't peace. It was sacrifice. He stepped out from cover, gun raised. Mason's eyes widened, just for a moment, and then both men fired. The sound was deafening. Mason stumbled back, clutching his chest. Eli felt the impact in his shoulder, the burn of lead and fire. He gritted his teeth, stayed standing. Mason dropped to his knees, his eyes filled with shock and hate. You always did have good aim, Mason gasped, blood darkening his shirt. Guess I should have remembered that. Eli lowered his gun, his breathing ragged. You should have remembered what I said about ghosts. Mason fell silent, eyes open but seeing nothing. The rain outside softened, as if the storm itself was finally letting go. Eli turned, pain tearing through his shoulder. Clara rushed to him, catching him before he fell. You're bleeding, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He smiled faintly. Ain't the first time. She pressed her hand against the wound, trembling. Why? Why did you have to face them? Because a man can't build a life on the ashes of his lies, he said softly. They came to take my past. I had to give it to them. Clara shook her head, holding him tighter. Don't you dare leave me again, Eli Carter. Not after all this. He touched her cheek with his good hand, his thumb brushing away the rain and tears. I told you I'd give you my life. Didn't say it'd be easy. She laughed through her sobs, clutching him close as he leaned against her. The church candles flickered again. Then through the open door the clouds began to break. A faint line of gold spilled across the fields, the first light of dawn. Eli looked toward it, his voice barely a whisper. Sun's rising. Looks like we made it through the night. Clara smiled through her tears. You made it home. He nodded slowly. Yeah, guess I did. The two of them sat there on the cold church floor, a wounded man and the woman who had waited through every storm for him. The rain eased into a drizzle, the air fresh with the scent of renewal. Outside, the land stretched wide and empty, waiting for whatever came next. Eli looked down at her hand in his, fingers interlaced. You still want to marry a man like me? She met his gaze, unwavering. No, she said softly. I want to marry the man you've become. He smiled, a faint, tired curve of lips. Then let's make that promise count. And as the dawn light poured through the stained glass window, casting colors over the altar and the pews, Eli Carter and Clara made their vow. Not in front of a preacher, not with a ring, but with the kind of truth that doesn't need words. The church bell rang once more, clear and bright. Outside, the last drops of rain fell on the graves and the golden grass, washing away the blood and the sorrow. A new day had come, one born not of forgiveness, but of faith. Eli had ridden to the churchyard in the rain to keep a promise, and in the end he found more than a waiting bride. He found a reason to live again,